You know, it's probably the best form of reconciliation I've ever seen, especially when people use terms like economic reconciliation. When you're not only you're closing the gap in terms of standard of living between First Nations and non-First Nations, but if you come to Kitimat, you'll see everybody succeeded. Non-First Nations and First Nations alike, even First Nations from different territories came in and took part. There was enough to go around. And so it uplifted everybody. And I always thought that reconciliation, that is a definition of reconciliation where there's no winners and losers. Everybody benefits, including the province, including the country.
Of course, is a fascinating little interview that Pierre Poilievre conducted, and it's a teaser for probably the third report we're going to be looking at today on Pierre Poilievre's take on reconciliation. I think it's quite productive. I think it's quite positive. And I'm going to be playing some of this interview with this First Nations individual who is a Conservative Party supporter. And I find it quite fascinating. But we're going to get to the crux of the news today, of course, is scandalous. I wasn't kidding. If you saw the headline, it's scandalous. And I'll be back in a minute to explain what's going on.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, we're back. Thank you for joining. We're still promoting our merchandise this weekend. Doesn't mean I won't continue to do so in the future. A lot of folks out there think it's a welcome change, and we'll see. This is a huge story. This is a huge story, and it's made the mainstream media. Halting spy operation placed CSIS team in unnecessary danger. Watchdog report says. Well, there's a lot more to it than this. And once again, we have to go to the independent media to find out more. My good friend Sam Cooper of the Bureau has written perhaps the definitive report on this. Breaking: Trudeau government unlawfully, read that, underline that, halted CSIS foreign operation, endangering officers and damaging Canada's standing with allies, review finds. So you might see some headlines out there on YouTube saying Trudeau is going to be arrested or he's busted. No, that's BS. Has he ever been arrested or busted for the crazy things or the unlawful things he's done? No. But this is, again, something Justin Trudeau must wear. He was responsible. Now I'm going to read briefly from Sam Cooper's piece because this is explosive. This is certainly a bombshell to some degree. And it's again indicative of the lack of concern or care the Trudeau government showed. And the Carney government will continue in the same vein. Let's read a bit of Sam's report here. An explosive intelligence review indicates that senior political actors surrounding Prime Minister Justin Trudeau unlawfully intervened in a high-risk Canadian Security Intelligence Service operation targeting foreign threats abroad in coordination with allied nations. A politicized act that placed Canadian operatives in immediate danger and inflicted lasting damage on the country's international reputation and trust among intelligence partners. According to the redacted report released Thursday by the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency, the order to halt the operation was the result of a political level discussion and first came from the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister to the Director of CSIS. So once again, this confirms it came directly from Justin Trudeau. The chain of command suggests the halt originated in the Prime Minister's office, not from the CSIS Director or Public Safety Minister as required under the CSIS Act. The latest blow to Canada's intelligence integrity, suggesting the inappropriate politicization of national security operation, comes amid growing tensions with key allies. In recent months, senior Trump administration official Peter Navarro reportedly raised the possibility of removing Canada from the Five Eyes intelligence alliance. That's big. the historic intelligence sharing partnership founded among allied nations during the Second World War. Now, who's in the Five Eyes Alliance? This is Canada, United States, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. This is an integral intelligence organization. Canada risks being thrown out because it's so sloppy with its intel. The NSIRA review was triggered in September 2022 when then Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino requested an examination of whether CSIS and his department had fulfilled their legal responsibilities. Both Prime Minister Trudeau and Mendicino have already faced scrutiny in a separate RCMP external review, which raised questions about whether their government inappropriately politicized national security responses during the so-called Freedom Convoy protest that descended on Ottawa during the pandemic. That is, again, confirmation that there was no intelligence. There was no intelligence suggesting there were far-right or alt-right or extremist groups behind the Freedom Convoy. We know this is a lie, and we know Trudeau is getting this not from CSIS sources, but from his own funded internet sources that were sowing the seeds of disinformation and misinformation, which, of course, Trudeau always accuses his political opponents of doing. That's what was happening. I'm going to read a bit more of this because I think this is extremely, extremely important. NSIRA's months-long investigation into the foreign operations suggests a disturbing pattern. A CSIS mission was suspended or delayed midstream, possibly for partisan or diplomatic reasons, without, read this, I'll say this again, without legal authority. The intervention endangered CSIS personnel, disrupted the agency's mandate to protect Canada from serious threats, and damaged intelligence cooperation with international allies. I want to say at this point, please share this broadcast with your friends and family. Please like it right now because, once again, I'm being sat on by you-know-who suppression. This is happening every day. Please share this broadcast with your friends and family. Let's beat this YouTube, suppression, and outright censorship. That's probably all I need to read from this report. This is incredible. I'll read one more line here. NSIRA found that the decision to halt this active CSIS operation, redacted, was not made by the CSIS director under Section 6.1 of the CSIS Act, and for which there is no written record of a direction coming from the Minister of Public Safety under the CSIS Act. The review concluded, moreover, redacted, to halt this active operation created unnecessary danger for the CSIS team, quote, redacted, unquote, and caused harm to Canada's international reputation, unquote. So that's an indictment. That is a severe indictment of Canada's intelligence and Justin Trudeau's politicization of the intelligence community and everything we do. Why did he halt the operation? Because of political reasons. You don't put your agents in harm's way because of politics, but Justin Trudeau did repeatedly. And this is absolutely unacceptable. Now, I got a couple of things to show you. I have been showing you this every day this week because I want people to be reminded. Canada is automatically now a signator of the World Health Organization's pandemic agreement. We didn't have a say. You and I didn't have a say in this, folks. Neither did the Parliament of Canada. There was no vote. The Parliament wasn't even sitting when the WHO automatically included Canada in its pandemic agreement. There was no vote. There was no protest. There was no debate. I am going to continue to put this up until somebody in the official opposition declares that this is an outrage. We have heard nothing from the Pierre Poilievre, nothing from the official opposition about this all week. Despite the fact the House has been sitting, we've had question period now for 4 days. Not a word about this. That is an outrage. And I'm absolutely stymied. I can't believe this. An update on the ostriches. And I know a lot of folks say, why are you so concerned about ostriches? I'm telling you why I'm so concerned about ostriches. Because if the Canada Food Inspection Agency can walk into anybody's farm, take their produce or take their animals and kill them, there is something gravely wrong with this country. And that is clear to me. So the farm, and I'm going to be talking to Katie about this hopefully tomorrow, the farm has asked U.S. Health and Human Services, or Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to visit the farm, because Ag Canada announced the other day that, well, the animals might not have to be culled, but they backed off from that. They said nothing since. They have not been in communication with the farm. I talked to Katie about this yesterday, and they have not been in communication with the farm. There's been absolutely no communication at all. So they're waiting to see what happens. But once again, this is not about science. There's no risk of avian flu here. The birds have developed herd immunity. But the government wants to play politics. They want to show this farm who's boss. They want this farm to grovel. And I'm saying enough of this BS. Now I want to get to Elon Musk here. This is quite a story. I'm going to show you Elon Musk, of course, is leaving his post as the director of the Department of Government Efficiency. I'll have a few things to say about that in a minute, but here's Musk's farewell.
Getting a lot of praise, I'll tell you, but he's also getting hit, and we would expect that, and that's the way it works. So I'd like to have Elon Musk please say a few words.
Well,
Thank you, Elon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually just owe myself a humble tech support here, because this is actually, as crazy as it sounds, that is almost a literal description of the work that the DOGE team is doing, is helping fix the government computer systems. Many of these systems are extremely old. They don't communicate. There are a lot of mistakes in the systems. The software doesn't work. So we are actually tech support. It's ironic, but it's true. The overall goal here with the DOGE team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing; it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here, and taking a lot of flack and getting a lot of death threats. By the way, I mean, I like to stack them up, you know. But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done. I'm confident at this point. Knock on wood, you know, knock on my wooden head. There's a lot of wood up there, that we can actually find $1 trillion in savings. That would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget. And obviously that can only be done with the support of everyone in this room. And I'd like to thank everyone for your support. Thank you very much. This can only be done with your support. So it's really, DOGE is a support function for the President and for the agencies and departments to help achieve those savings and to effectively find 15% in reduction in fraud and waste. And we bring the receipts. So people say, like, well, is this real? Just go to doge.gov. We line item by line item, we specify each item. So and I should say, we will make mistakes. We won't be perfect, but when we
I have to say at this point, for DOGE to be truly effective, it has to have access to the Pentagon, because they're a $1 trillion budget. You know, there's waste going on in the Pentagon. And of course, I'm a pro-military guy. I served in the Canadian Armed Forces. I love the military, but I know within Canada, there's huge waste going on. And I know within the United States, with a $1 trillion budget, there's tremendous waste occurring. And DOGE needs access to the Pentagon. DOGE needs to look at military spending just like it looks at other spending. And if you save money with your left hand and you give away $1 trillion with your right hand, and don't make that $1 trillion spending subject to assessment, analysis, it's almost a worthless project. And that has to be said. I've got to say that because I'm 100% behind the idea of DOGE, but it's got to be all encompassing.
make a mistake, we'll fix it very quickly. So, for example, with USAID, one of the things we accidentally canceled very briefly was Ebola, Ebola prevention. I think we all want Ebola prevention. So we restored the Ebola prevention immediately, and there was no interruption. But we do need to move quickly if we're to achieve a $1 trillion deficit reduction in financial year 2026. It requires saving $4 billion per day, every day, from now through the end of September. But we can do it, and we will do it. Thank you.
Would you have any questions of Elon while we're on the subject of those? Because we'll finish off with that. And if you would have any questions, please ask. You could ask me or Elon. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Musk. I just wanted to ask you that President Trump put out a Truth Social today saying that everybody in the cabinet was happy with you. I just wondered if you had heard otherwise, and if you had heard anything about members of the cabinet who weren't happy with the way things were going, and if so, what are you doing to address those any dissatisfaction?
Hey, Elon, let the cabinet speak just for a second. Is anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw them out of here. Is anybody unhappy?
Right, so nobody's unhappy with Musk in the cabinet. Very, very funny, Donald Trump. Okay. But of course, the mainstream media can't let Elon Musk leave DOGE quietly. They've got to start an attack. Was there any coincidence here? The New York Times does a hit piece on Elon Musk just as he's leaving DOGE. I am not taking drugs, Musk denies, damning report. And of course, the questions they're asking Donald Trump are, did you know Elon Musk was taking drugs? So he could say, well, no, I didn't know that. But I've seen very few media organizations phrase the question properly, which is, were you aware that Elon Musk was reportedly or allegedly taking drugs? The mainstream media wants us to think that Elon Musk now is a drug addict. That this is why he went into the Trump administration. This is why he headed up DOGE. This is why he campaigned so heavily and so strongly for Donald Trump, because he's a drug addict. And this is how the deep state gets rid of you. The deep state wants to get rid of you and discredit you and cancel you. You're what? An alcoholic. You're a drug addict, or child pornography is found on your computer. And this is exactly how the deep state gets rid of people and absolutely cancels them. And this is what the deep state is up to here with Elon Musk. Elon Musk has done a damn good job. Like I say, DOGE needs to go further. That doesn't mean you stop DOGE. It doesn't mean you destroy DOGE because it's not exactly doing what you think it should be doing. I think it needs to go after the Pentagon. It needs to go after military spending because there's huge waste at the Pentagon. That doesn't mean I think DOGE should disappear, or I think Elon Musk did a lousy job. He's exposed scandal after scandal in government spending, whether it's USAID or it's hundreds of thousands of credit cards that are still being used by people who aren't even working for the government, and they're charging their bills to the federal government. That's another thing DOGE uncovered. DOGE has done a great job. It needs to do more. But this is how the deep state, the bureaucracy discredits things. And of course, the bureaucracy doesn't like DOGE because it's uncovering waste in government. And it's uncovering unnecessary government workers, unnecessary government employees. So the deep state doesn't like that at all. Now, I want to get to the last part of this discussion here because I find this absolutely fascinating. And this is about reconciliation. We hear a lot about reconciliation, right? And as far as I'm concerned, it's time to stop talking about guilt. It's time to stop talking about what happened 200 years ago and who was right and who was wrong. It's time to start talking about equality of persons in this country. We're all equal under the law. We do not judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That's how we judge people. And let me get rid of that. And that's what reconciliation should be about. It should be about bringing in First Nations as equal partners in Canada, equal partners in our economic experience. And I think Pierre Poilievre gets this. Once again, I'll play this brief clip.
And it's probably the best form of reconciliation I've ever seen, especially when people use terms like economic reconciliation. When you're not only you're closing the gap in terms of standard of living between First Nations and non-First Nations, but if you come to Kitimat, you'll see everybody succeeded. Mm-hmm. Non-First Nations and First Nations alike, even First Nations from different territories, came in and took part. There was enough to go around. And so it uplifted everybody. And I always thought that reconciliation, that is a definition of reconciliation where there's no winners and losers. Everybody benefits, including the province, including the country. Get some of those bureaucratic rules out of the way, all those policies that restrict development. I mean, talk to First Nations that have this vision, not only the vision to get their own people out of poverty, but also have a vision for building the country. I mean, I think the one thing that I've seen in the last year that I've never seen before, the country realized they have to come together given what happened down in the United States with Mr. President Trump. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen that before. And I think it's about time that Canada really thought about their place in the geoeconomics of the world. I mean, you can't help but think what Russia's doing, what China's doing, what the United States is doing. Where do we fit in? And that's mainly why I wanted to join the Conservative Party. Mm-hmm. I wanted to see this country rebuilt the way that people envisioned it 100 years ago.
Fantastic. This is what we need to hear. And this is what the message of reconciliation should be. Let's all be equal in this country. I've been saying that all of my adult life. And I grew up on the west coast of Canada. I had lots of friends who were Indigenous, who belonged to First Nations tribes like Kwakiutl, Haida. We were all friends. And I always said, I don't judge you by your history. I don't judge you by the color of your skin. I don't judge you by your ethnicity. I judge you by the content of your character. I really believe in the color blindness advanced by Martin Luther King. We need more of that today. We need more of that common sense thinking about race in this country. We don't need to put race, against people against people. We don't need identity politics. We're all equal under the law. And I like what Pierre Poilievre is doing here. I joked yesterday, he's doing this now on a nightly basis. He's doing these little fireside chats. And I joked, it reminded me of the old SCTV skit with John Candy, who I loved John Candy, and I grew up with SCTV. It was one of my favorite shows. And I thought if you didn't like one gag, you liked the next one. That's the way the show was. It was always just rolling with the humor. But John Candy, one of the characters he did, of course, he did Johnny LaRue as one of his most best known, but he did the mayor of Melonville, Mayor Tommy Shanks. And he used to come on and he'd say, "Hi, how you doing?" "I'm doing pretty well myself." And I thought, this is what Poilievre, I think, is channeling in these fireside chats. And I'm not ridiculing him. I'm not belittling him. I think this is something he probably needs to do, but it is to some degree humorous. And I think Pierre Poilievre can use a bit of humor. And let's listen to this for a few minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be introducing you to someone very special today, part of our growing Conservative team on Parliament Hill. Ellis Ross was born in Kitimat, British Columbia, right on the Pacific coast. He grew up in an Indigenous community, was very successful, became the chief counselor of the Haisla First Nation. Then he was elected to the provincial legislature, became Minister of Gas and Development, and more recently, he helped negotiate one of the single biggest energy deals in Canadian history, the LNG Canada plant, $40 billion. I think it's the single biggest infrastructure project the country has ever known. And to the great benefit of the Haisla people, but to all Canadians, it will soon come online and much anticipated. But after achieving all that, I went out and recruited him to become a candidate for the Conservative Party, and he won. For the first time since the Skinnabuckley Valley seat has been reconstituted, he has won it for the Conservatives. We defeated the NDP in that riding, and now he is serving as the Shadow Minister for the Environment, where he will be working with our team to get big projects pushed through, projects that will defeat poverty, provide cheap, affordable, reliable energy, not only to Canadians but to the world, and massive paychecks for our people. But I want you to get to know this incredible person so you understand the team that we're putting together, not only to hold this government to account, but to prepare as a government in waiting. Ellis, thanks.
We're going to play a bit more of that in a minute, but as it is merchandise weekend, I've got to show you my store. Yeah, please have a look at our store. There's some great merchandise. I've been wearing it all weekend. I'm going to continue to wear it during the broadcasts in the future. Let's listen to a bit more of this interview, then I have some concluding remarks to say afterwards.
For me, before we get started on the politics of today, I think people would enjoy getting to know a little bit about you. You have an incredible family history. You're part of the Haisla Nation. Why don't you tell us, who are the Haisla, for people who don't know?
The Haisla are Koguth people. That's our dialect, and we originate from a small community further south from us, Owikino, Rivers Inlet. Mm-hmm. We're actually associated with, language-wise, with Witlisla, which is Bella Bella as well as people in Vancouver. But we're really relatively newcomers to the area. If you're talking about newcomers, going back further back than 10,000 years.
10,000 years.
Yeah, and so we came up and we actually settled in what is now known as Kitimat Village.
Yes.
And then we invited a lot of other First Nations to come join us.
When did the Haisla settle in Kitimat?
Well,
ballpark.
I've been told different times, but I think the safest guess is more than 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years ago.
Mainly
in that particular location.
In that particular location, mainly because there was Wilkins there, as kind of a smelt, a fish, and at that time it was all rocks. There's no trees. At a time when the channel itself, a saltwater channel, used to freeze over. So I heard all the stories about what it was like when our people first settled there.
And where would they have been before that, or is that too far back to know?
They were originally from Rivers Inlet.
Okay.
Owikino is the traditional name.
So I encourage you to watch this entire interview. You can find it on Pierre Poilievre's station. And I have to say, this is a little bizarre for Pierre Poilievre to be doing the interview, leading the interview, and not being the other side of it. But I know what he's doing here, and I think it's probably what he needs to do right now. And if he can redefine the term reconciliation to not mean guilt, to not mean we owe people something, they own our property, we owe them. No, we don't. We're all equal. We all need to compete equally in this economy, and that's what reconciliation should be about. Is integrating First Nations people into the Canadian economy so they can be as productive as everybody else. And they have been, they are, they're contributing. There's so many success stories of First Nations out there. That's what Pierre Poilievre needs to emphasize. And that's what Ellis here, the new Conservative MP from the Kitimat area, is emphasizing. He's the environment critic for the Conservative Party. Bravo. We need more of this. And this is what Canada needs to be about. Not about identity politics, not about racial division, not about historical guilt, but about productivity and prosperity in the present. And I think that's what Pierre Poilievre needs to emphasize. In the meantime, he cannot be co-opted by the Carney government. He must have a separate path that leads to victory. He's got a lot ahead of him this summer. He's going to be facing a by-election in a part of Alberta that is heavily leaning towards independence. So it's going to be a very difficult campaign for him in many ways. We'll be watching. Tonight, if you still can get tickets to the Jimmy Dore concert comedy event in Ottawa tonight, you can still do it. I will be there. I will be interviewing Jimmy Dore at the event. And we'll be playing that tomorrow morning. I hope it's going to be a great night. But please, come on out tonight. You can still get tickets at www.jimmydore.com. You can get them online. And as Jimmy Dore says, that's the best place to get them. He had a sold-out show in Montreal. Let's make sure he has a sold-out show in Ottawa. Let's show Jimmy Dore that we have a sense of humor in the nation's capital. And this is a guy who appeals across the political spectrum because he talks about truth and he's actually funny. Unlike a lot of late night comics today who aren't even funny. They're cruel, they're political, they spew propaganda, they're in the Democratic camp, but they're not funny. Jimmy's a funny guy. I hope you come out tonight and see him. I'll be there. Be there or be square. Thanks for watching today, folks. Go to church today. Or if that's not where you usually go to temple, go to synagogue. But I'm going to church this morning. And I'm still saying God bless this country. Godspeed to all of you. And I'll be back again tomorrow. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from Ottawa. Bye for now.